Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma. Before I get started with today's kind of random update episode, there's little tidbits and flashes of things going all over Steelers Nation here within like the last few days. I just wanted to give a quick shout out over to Steelers Nation South, Matt, and the guys and girls that are there that I've been talking to for the last several weeks. Really cool group. Matt's got some really neat things going on. They have a Facebook page and a Facebook group. If you have a chance, go do a search for them and follow them over on Facebook. You'll find the links to that too over on the Steel City Underground Facebook. And if you're not familiar with that, just head over to steelcityunderground.com. You'll find the Facebook link in our footer. And Matt and those guys are putting out some really cool hype videos. They're awesome. You got to go over there and check it out. In fact, I shared one or two of them, and I believe Matt's been putting them over on my wall too. So if you have a chance, check it out. The videos are really cool, really neat little clips there. Some just Ben Roethlisberger and some random Steelers highlights and things of that nature that are really, really neat. So check that out. They're one of the friends of the Underground. I have several friends of the Underground too. And if you're interested and you happen to run a website, podcast, Facebook page, Facebook group, community, or anything like that, you'll notice I've been giving some shout outs here on the show. Just shoot me a message. You could hit me up over at the email address info@steelcityunderground.com. You can message me on Facebook. Just a fair warning, and some of the guys know this that talk to me. If you send me a message on Twitter, I'm likely to probably not see it for several days if I see it at all. What ends up happening is on my Twitter account, and I'm not sure about some of you, but you'll kill my battery on my phone. And actually, this is kind of fun. This is really funny. Earlier this week, I made a comment much the same. Been trying to hook up with my boy Rudy Rude Dog Reyes over there, who runs the Rude Dog Show out of California. I believe that's where Rudy is based. And Rudy, I got into the habit of, or just made the mistake of getting into a discussion with him and a few other fans. And I think it was also David Ribeiro of Steelers Sanctuary. And I put my phone down and I come back to it the next morning and I had 68 new notifications on my Twitter. Just these guys were going well past midnight, at least Eastern time, burning the candle, burning that midnight oil, right, as they used to say. I don't know anybody that says it from my generation, but, you know, it's one of those cliches as they go. So Dave and Rudy and a few others are just going, I don't even remember what we were talking about. They're just going back and forth, talking Steelers football. Some two other great guys you can go over and follow on Twitter that really gives some really cool insights for the Pittsburgh Steelers and pro football in general, because sometimes there's just some really cool NFL news that may or may not pertain or affect the Steelers, and sometimes it does. And that's kind of where I'm headed today, because I was having a small discussion over on our YouTube channel about the last podcast with Brandon Boykin, and I come in late. I think it was almost like 1 a.m. when I recorded the show. I had a very busy day, spending time down in Pittsburgh. If you follow us over on Twitter, you'll see I posted the pierogi truck. Got some pierogies right outside of the Super Mario statue, the Console Energy Center. Got to check out a very cool Game 2. And here we are with Game 3. The Pens are up 2-1. No, it's not a Pens podcast here. You could follow Pens Initiative, who's a member of the Champion Sports Network, by the way, as well as Steel City Underground is. But you could follow them, and just the whole Pens thing, just Pittsburgh in general. I'm going to talk about Pittsburgh sports here later in the show too, but someone had said, you know, hey, you didn't really say anything special about Brandon Boykin. And it's like, well, I'm not sitting with my ear against the locker room door or the Steelers front office, or I'm not war driving somewhere around the headquarters trying to sneak onto their Wi-Fi or anything like that. Nothing crazy. I mean, the insider information, sometimes I'm telling you guys things that you already know, and sometimes it's just giving an insight or a different way of looking or approaching a news story. And Brandon Boykin is just, I'm not done with him yet. In fact, I'm gonna open this show talking about Brandon Boykin, because on Bob Labriola hosts a show on Steelers.com, and sometimes they do it in spurts, and they've been on a roll this week. I think Bob's put out like 3 or 4 or 5 of these almost once a day. And of course, someone asks about Brandon Boykin, and I think we hit the nail on the head because when I put this out, and as all things that are controversial and people have their opinions, there's some things going back and forth about, well, is he a good player? Is he a bad player? Is he a locker room cancer, a headache, a problem, or is he just kind of towing the company line there? And Ed Bouchette had basically said the other day that as far as he knew, Brandon Boykin was just sitting there being quiet, minding his P's and Q's, biting his tongue, and just kind of went with the flow. I mean, we know the situation, and as far as comparing statistics, and I hope I made the point as coherent as possible after I was pumped up from the Pens' overtime victory. The Brandon Boykin, okay, the measurables, and if you put similar measurables between him and the other corners, and some of the corners played more and blah, 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 but just the fact the Steelers were willing to play Rob Golden over Boykin in several situations, particularly at the end of the year as an extra defensive back in there, whatever you want to call it, a third safety, an extra corner. It depends if he's playing in the box, if he's in coverage. He kind of was like a jack of all trades. Golden was also, I wanted to say he was first or second on the special team snaps. It's not that show, obviously. If you want to go back, that was Tuesday morning's show. I had a little bit more of a talk of it, but Boykin, of course, released from the Carolina Panthers just the other day, and the question is posed to Bob Labriola about whether the Steelers would be interested in maybe re-signing or looking at bringing Boykin back in, okay? And I don't think they are. They have plenty of corners on this roster now. And, of course, the situation, as you remember, that dictated bringing Brandon Boykin in and having a conditional pick tied to that ended up being a 5th-round pick, for which we thought that was most of the reason why Brandon Boykin was sitting on the bench most of last year, was because the Steelers didn't want to go as high as a 4th-round pick if he played a certain percentage of snaps. Now, the deal is, and this is what Labriola says. He says Brandon Boykin is a slot cornerback who is not a physical presence on the field and doesn't care to be. He's just a guy. Wow. Okay. And that's kind of, well, he continues here. He says he never heard Kevin Colbert or Mike Tomlin talk about Brandon Boykin in anything but realistic terms. It is a Steelers nation that made the guy a Hall of Famer in waiting the moment he stepped foot on the St. Vincent College campus. My opinion is that because of the Senquez Golson injury that was going to require surgery and cost him his rookie season, a 5th-round pick for Boykin, who was thought to be the same kind of slot corner as Golson, was worth the gamble. Yes, Bob, exactly. You put it in way better words than I probably could dictate, so that's why I'm just repeating it verbatim, but that's exactly what happened. And the Steelers had to bring in someone to replace a player who they felt was going to be there and fill that role for that year. That year is now gone, and the Steelers have moved on. They now will have Golson, barring any other injury, for this upcoming season. Rather than Boykin, they don't need another slot corner. And whatever happened with the Carolina Panthers or whatnot, the Steelers fans still have this fascination with the secondary being bad. Okay, they're 30th in pass defense. We get that. We know that they're trying to improve on that. They might not be the best. They weren't the worst. They weren't far from it. Some of that pass defense, too, just it lies on the linebackers. So let's not get into the statistics in the secondary today, but just the fact of everyone hailed this guy as a savior for this team, and he couldn't get on the field over Rob Golden. I mean, that tells you all that you need to know, right? I mean, it's just really, really crazy to me to just see that the way the fans really put Brandon Boykin on this pedestal, and everyone else is sitting here with a more realistic view of things, like an Ed Bouchette or Bob Labriola or even myself, that realize now there's a lot more of this story, just not even just on the field actions, but off the field actions, as to why Brandon Boykin is currently unemployed in the NFL. So speaking of unemployed and players and controversy and people I just can't seem to stop talking about, did you guys hear the latest news on Dre Archer? So, Wednesday, the Bills placed Dre Archer formerly of the New York Jets, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, on the reserve did not report list after Archer failed to report to the Bills after Buffalo claimed him off waivers from the Jets. Ouch. And I'm looking at this article right here, and it's talking about the 5'8", 177-pound Archer led the NFL with 14 kickoff returns at the time of his release from the Steelers. He was averaging 25.3 yards per return, the best average among players with at least 10 kickoff returns at that time. And I mentioned that the kickoff rules are constantly changing, and I'm probably going to do a podcast dedicated just to that here in the near future. On Monday, I put out an article about whether or not kick returners are just I lost it. They're just not a commodity anymore in the NFL. They're just not valued in the same way. But that was then, and this might be now, and we might see there's two sides of the coin to this new kickoff rule change that's coming up. But the Steelers, as we know, they kind of moved on from Dre Archer. They tried Jacoby Jones. He fumbled the ball a few times, got thrown on the bench, and then I believe released. And then they ended up just putting Marcus Wheaton back there for the remainder of the season, and he just took a bunch of knees. But we might not see players take knees as much here in the near future. I'll explain why in a future show. But just going on more news, and it didn't take very long. Zach Mettenberger during this week released from the Tennessee Titans. Apparently, they're more than happy rolling with Marcus Mariota, and they got a few other guys there. I can't remember the whole Titans roster, but if you remember, Ken Wisenhunt, formerly the head coach with the Tennessee Titans, lost his job midway through the season. He was a former offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers and also former head coach for the Arizona Cardinals, if you remember Wiz being here. He lost his job to another former Steelers offensive coordinator in Mike Mularkey, who's now the presiding head coach of the Tennessee Titans. So they decided to get rid of Zach Mettenberger. Almost as fast as you could say it, the clickbait articles start coming out whether or not Zach Mettenberger could be signed by the Steelers. The Steelers already have. They have their three guys, and then they have their camp arm when it comes to their quarterbacks. They have 4 quarterbacks on the roster right now. I didn't think they would make any type of concession for cap room or roster space to bring Mettenberger aboard. That's not to say Mettenberger is not a bad QB. I just think the Steelers are settled with what they have this year, barring any type of injury. So, of course, as fast as you can say Steelers and Mettenberger, we find out that Mettenberger's headed on over to San Diego and the Chargers, where Ken Wisenhunt, his former head coach, is now returning to his duties as the offensive coordinator, a position he held just a couple of years ago before taking the Tennessee head position. So, Mettenberger, that one is not even going to happen, okay? Another backup quarterback that it seems like isn't going to happen, and this, I don't know why this always comes up too, but a story about Michael Vick, and it looks like Michael Vick is going to be done. Well, of course, Michael Vick isn't coming to the Steelers training camp or any of his off-season activities. He's not on the roster. He's a free agent. How much crazier does this have to be? I just don't understand why this continues to be a story when the guy doesn't have a contract with a team. That would be like saying Emmitt Smith isn't reporting to the Dallas Cowboys training camp this year. Well, duh, he's not a current player on the roster. It's just the way it works. The bus is not coming to St. Vincent College, at least not to practice with the team. Now, if he wanted to end up coaching or give a pep talk or whatever like that, or just come and sign autographs for fans, okay. I'm sure that could be a really cool headline saying Jerome Bettis comes to training camp. But it's just as preposterous to keep saying and keep holding on to this notion that Michael Vick isn't even that good of a quarterback. I think Michael Vick's, 37 now? And he doesn't have nearly the type of workout ethic, longevity, or stamina as 38-year-old James Harrison. You put those guys in the same category, and James Harrison just keeps going like the Energizer Bunny. He is a beast. But Michael Vick just hasn't really been the same player for many, many years. And I do wish him well. I do believe I liked the signing last year. I was really high on it. It just didn't work out. He wasn't necessarily a fit for the system. You just never know. If an injury does happen, Michael Vick might be there as an emergency type guy that they call up and add to the roster mid-season. So Don't hold your breath, though, on Michael Vick reporting to training camp unless something happens otherwise. And speaking of players on the roster competing for positions, injuries, and whatnot, another one that continues to pop up on the list here is Sean Sweejum and Chris Boswell, and who's going to be the Steelers kicker. And this is one of my topics from the offseason predictions and moves that the Steelers would make. And I'm pretty sure that Sean Sweejum won't be a Steeler come the start of the regular season, but he's still not healthy yet. He's still not ready to begin kicking or even start with a kicking battle. We still have a long time to go yet before we actually see that. We're going to head into August and maybe see where Sweejum is. And I really don't know what the contract terms, if he's probably, if he's still under injury and hasn't recovered, he'll probably still end up on a physically unable to perform list, injured reserve, or something like that, and maybe still have the Steelers may still have some rights to him should the younger and cheaper and just as or more effective Chris Boswell, who has a cannon for a leg. What a find, especially when you consider what the Steelers gave up a draft pick and brought in Josh Scobie, who basically lost them the Baltimore Ravens game played at Heinz Field last year. And I don't think any of us, at least in the short term, will forgive Josh Scobie for that game. And a lot of us do blame the aforementioned Michael Vick for that. And, as a team, you go down, but there are certain individual performances that can hurt a team more than help them. That's exactly where Josh Scobie was. But back to, I do expect Chris Boswell to be the kicker, regardless if Sean Sweejum is still a Steeler or not come September when the Steelers open up on Monday Night Football against the Washington Redskins. That's just a matter of whether or not Sweejum is healthy enough to even perform, play, and compete for this job. I don't know. But Sean Sweejum, who was signed to a long-term contract at the beginning of last year's season, I've always felt he was a good kicker, and he will always go down as one of my favorite Steelers. Now, speaking of Steelers, former Steelers, and we were talking San Diego Chargers, and we're going to talk about another guy who was a San Diego Chargers tight end coming to the Steelers, and I'm not talking about Ladarius Green, the biggest free agent acquisition that the Steelers made this offseason. I'm talking about former Steeler David Johnson, who signed a one-year contract, I believe one-year deal. I don't have the terms here for how much it was for, but David Johnson, who had a little bit of an injury history during his time here. He was released by the Chargers. He's coming back to the Steel City, and we kind of see the role that we already know the role David Johnson's going to play. It used to call him like an H-back. It's one of those guys that can play as a tight end or a fullback. And that's kind of where Will Johnson was before he left and signed with the New York Giants this previous offseason. I used to get on one of these, it was forums or Facebook or one of these groups or something like that. And I had one guy that was always on my case about even attempting to throw the ball to Will Johnson. I never really understood that. Okay, it's probably not the highest conversion play, but it's not like Will Johnson was always the hot read. The first look on these pass attempts is kind of just silly. I don't think Todd Haley runs his offense like that, but we do know that Todd Haley likes to have these versatile players. In fact, Mike Tomlin has always had a player that can kind of fulfill that role of playing either as an extra blocker out on the edge as a tight end, or can go line up maybe offset I or dot and I or any number of those looks and formations. And that's exactly what David Johnson's going to contribute, provided he stays healthy and can make this team. It will be interesting. They did keep both Will Johnson and Roosevelt Nix, for who, another one of my underground friends, Eric Herman at Steelers Grind, he has a giant man crush on Rosie Nix. He wanted his autograph at the Fan Blitz. You should have got it, Eric. I'm telling you. When are you ever going to have another chance to get an autograph from Roosevelt Nix? So, and then another short update here. Speaking of all of these players, they're going to be heading into Phase 3, or the OTAs. Phase 3 of the offseason program will begin on Monday, May 23rd. And, well, the NFL begins on Monday, May 23rd. The Steelers are actually scheduled to start on Tuesday, May 24th. They're going to have 3 of those sessions the first week, 3 the second week, and then 4 the week after to get their total allotment of 10 in. This is one of these like workout or training sessions where there's no live contact permitted. They are allowed to have 7-on-7, 9-on-7, and 11-on-11 drills, but no pads, no contact. You hear that, Baltimore Ravens? Supposedly the Ravens went and had a rookie minicamp where they thought it was okay to put pads on for at least a punt or a special teams drill. I don't know if we'll hear any more of that, but they thought maybe the rules didn't pertain to the rookie minicamp or something like that. Yeah, the rules only pertain to 31 other teams, right? Okay, Baltimore, go figure, right? And then just speaking of the goofy rules that we have in the NFL, James Harrison goes to try and record his drug test and apparently is told that he would fail his drug test if he would have recorded it at that time. So apparently that is a rule in black and white there for everyone to see too. Always an interesting story with James Harrison. Is he a guy of integrity or not? I mean, I spoke ad nauseum about him in a podcast, dedicated an entire show just to him. You could go back and listen to that. I mean, it's just one heck of a story, released like 4 times before he actually sticks to a roster and then becomes an NFL defensive MVP the one year. And you know, he's got a couple Super Bowl rings on his fingers. And I mean, one of the most memorable plays in Steelers Super Bowl history. And I mean, there's quite a few of those, but I mean, we could pretty much count them on just all of our fingers, right? Maybe all the digits on our hands. And to be one of those of such a storied franchise, it's got to be really cool considering his humble beginnings. He was playing in NFL Europe, you know? So the OTAs, as I was saying, they'll wrap up by June 9th, and then the mandatory 3-day minicamp will be on June 14th through 16th. We still don't have any dates as of yet, at least as this recording yet, to see when they will be at St. Vincent College for training camp. So keep an eye on that. And I'm going to end on one other note. When I was talking about the Pens and all this cool stuff with the Eastern Conference Finals of the Stanley Cup, and my cousin Brad, who we were talking about maybe recording one of these on the road, driving down or driving back, and we would have just talked about hockey the whole time, so it would have been worthless, and I just went against it. But how cool is it that the city of Pittsburgh, just everything is black and gold? And I saw one of these questions, I think it was posed to like Bob Labriola or Ed Bouchette in one of these live chats or something like that. And somebody had asked about how all the professional sports teams in Pittsburgh are black and gold. And it isn't something that's very common. I'm not sure that any other major professional sports teams wear the same colors across their major sports in any other city, in fact. And it has to do with, if you notice the Steel City Underground logo that I had developed, a few elements in that. I may have talked about this before. The West End Bridge, where that's an area where I always walk by, come in through town that way, and we tailgate and we see it, and it's just in the background. That became part of my seal. But, you know, black and gold, and also the checkers, and I know the checkerboard piece, it almost looks like a taxi type thing or racing or NASCAR or something, but it's actually, that is borrowed or inspired by the seal of Pittsburgh, which is also on their flag, which is black and gold. And that's their coat of arms, actually. And of course the checkers are blue, and I didn't make it the same way because it doesn't fit that black and gold theme. But with that coat of arms, and the city has an ordinance dating back to December of 1925, and the Pittsburgh City Council states that the colors of Pittsburgh are black and gold. And that is how the professional sports teams in Pittsburgh, in the Steel City, have just come to borrow that as their colors underneath their banner. Very, very awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, always a good time chatting with you. Until the next time, be safe, be cool, be good, and I'll catch you soon.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.